Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to The Varied Life. I'm Steve, the retired hobby tech guy, the American expat who's living in Korea. Welcome back. So what we're going to end up doing today is we're going to take a look at a topic, retire overseas and never have to pay state taxes again. It almost seems like a dream come true. Almost seems too good to be true, but there's some actual truth to it, and we're going to get into that. I've got a lot of, here's the situation that I'm in. For those of you who don't know, what I ended up doing is I decided that I wanted to retire overseas because living in the United States with ever increasing expenses, the increases just kept going up every year, like property tax would go up $100 every year without fail. And if you project that out to the time of when you're, mid to late 60s, almost 70 in my situation, combined with the other increases of utilities and so on and so forth, it got to the point of where it's like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to retire. So with that, the draw was retiring overseas requires less money, or in other words, the US dollar goes further in some overseas locations, so you're able to retire early or able to retire comfortably or better in overseas locations than you do in the United States. Again, it's an individual situation and there are some compromises that need to be made, but excuse me, with that being said, we took the plunge and decided to sell everything. The house, the cars, the guns, the ammo, everything in the kitchen junk drawer, more guns, more ammo, all of that stuff. We sold everything. And what we ended up doing is taking a couple of suitcases and we found ourselves here in South Korea. Now with that, Korea is not a retirement-friendly country, kind of like the Philippines or Thailand or Cambodia or others that have retirement visas for retirees. So how was I able to retire in Korea? Well, what I ended up doing is because of my wife's Korean ancestry, she was able to apply for an F4 visa. And that is like essentially somebody who has Korean ancestry and became a U.S. citizen or a citizen of another country, or maybe let's say you're adopted from Korea or you have Korean family members, but you were born in the United States and you're a citizen. That F4 visa can allow you to return back to Korea and live in Korea under that visa, the F4. Now, how did I get the visa? Well, my F1 visa is attached to her F4 visa because I'm the spouse of a returning Korean. So my F1 visa is attached to her F4 visa. So that allowed us to basically get a long-term visa here in Korea and retire. The term of our visas is 2 years. So every 2 years we have to renew. And basically it's not exactly 2 years. It's about 3 months prior to the 2-year mark that you have to put in your renewal paperwork. Not a lot of bureaucracy. It's pretty simple. We have an immigration lawyer, helps us out with all this stuff. And if you want that contact information, put a comment, or better yet, send me a message at the email address that you can see below. We'll just kind of go over here. There's the email address, official@thevariedlife@gmail.com, and I can get you that information. And I also have other videos showing the contact card for our immigration lawyer. Does a really great job. Again, it worked well for us. You might not click with certain people, I understand that, but they did some really good work for us, and they continue to do good work with our renewals and so on and so forth. And it just makes life so much easier because the immigration lawyer is in the same building as the Korean government immigration office. So they're well apprised of any changes that come in immigration law. And it's nice to have somebody on your side so that knows what's going on. So with that, back to the topic of retire overseas and never pay state taxes again. This seems like it's illegal. And because I was under the assumption, along with many other people, because I had asked this question, but the problem was the people I asked had moved to other countries and they were still paying state taxes. And that kind of, for some reason, that just didn't sit right with me, because when you're in the United States, if you move from one state to another state, you don't have to pay the old state taxes, because your residence is now in a new state and you pay their taxes if that state has taxes, state taxes. Some states don't, but they make up for that revenue with other fees and so on and so forth. But with that being said, if you come from a state that does not have state taxes, when you retire overseas, or specifically, like in our case, retire here in Korea, you won't have to pay state taxes. You still might have to file, but generally, if your state doesn't have state taxes, yeah, you just don't pay state taxes. It's that simple. But this is a question that came up, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. Now, the first disclaimer that I have is this is not professional advice. Check with qualified professionals about this and your individual situation for your state and where you're retiring to. I cannot stress that enough. There's so many things that change, sometimes daily, whether the country that you're living in or the state that you're living in, or there's also tax treaties that come into play when we're talking about federal taxes. All immigration laws change, so be sure to check and do your own due diligence. Don't just take my word for it. And that's the reason why I did the research on my own and contacted my state to find out, hey, here's the situation. Basically what it comes down to is residency. Residency is really important. And like I explained, if you move from one state in the United States to another state, you only apply to the state that you're living in. In other words, residency is a huge factor when it comes to paying taxes. If you don't live in a state and you don't have residency there, full-time residency, then you're most likely not going to have to pay taxes, that state tax, because you live somewhere else as your primary residence. Again, there are particulars if you're only vacationing for certain times or amount of time during the year. That's where the waters get a little bit muddy, and I highly suggest you get with a tax professional to look into those situations. But when we're talking about paying taxes, this is really interesting, because that is a big question. And it's interesting because when the information that I found out, I informed a couple other expats that were living here in Korea, who are retiring here, doing the same thing that we were doing, and they were still paying state taxes. Every year they're filing their state taxes. Talked to a gentleman, and he's like, wow, did you get your taxes done? Because it's tax time, and we have our appointment here pretty soon. But, in the state tax and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I don't pay state tax. And he's like, what? And he goes, but you're... And it just didn't click. And I know how that feeling is when it just doesn't click. It's like, well, you got to pay taxes, right? And it's like, no. I checked with the Department of Revenue for the state that I used to live in, which was the state of Colorado. And I asked them this very question. I said, hey, I am leaving the United States. I'm retiring overseas. My primary residence is going to be in a foreign country, and I no longer have residence. I no longer have properties. I don't have businesses or anything in the state of Colorado. Am I still liable to pay Colorado taxes? And I got an email back from the Department of Revenue for the state of Colorado, and they said no, because your primary residence is in a foreign country. So just like if you lived in another state and that is your primary residence, that absolves you from paying tax in the state of Colorado. Now, with that being said, there are particulars, because what happens if you have pension plans with the state of Colorado or, some other weird thing like that, definitely check with a tax professional, and that's why I have this disclaimer here. But when I told this individual that, and I recommended that he contact the Department of Revenue for the state that he was paying taxes in, later I saw him again, and he said, yeah, I just found out that I don't need to be paying state taxes. So, with that being said, that's something to look into. So we're going to go into more details on this a little bit. So let's take a look. And here's the general breakdown that we're going to take a look at. Residency is the key when we're talking about taxes. And this is just some information to give to you to mull over so that way you can take this and then go see a qualified professional and ask about this for your specific circumstance. But basically, for state tax purposes, as we see here, residency is crucial. Since you have retired, moved permanently to Korea, and have no intention of returning to the U.S. to live, you have almost certainly changed your legal domicile, your true permanent home, your place of residence, from the former United States, U.S. state, to Korea. This means you're likely a non-resident by your former state for tax purposes, starting from the date you established permanent residency in Korea. So the devil is in the details, and you might have to pay some tax depending on when you came to Korea or when you established your primary residency in Korea or whatever overseas location that you're retiring in. Taxation of non-residents. States generally only tax non-residents on income that is sourced from that specific state. So again, like I said, let's say there's some type of investment. Let's say you have a business that you retired, but you're getting money or income or maybe even a pension from Colorado or the state that you're in or used to be in, and you're retired overseas. There are some details that might change this. But with our situation, we don't have to worry about it. So anyway, examples of state-sourced income include rental income from property located in that state, income from a business conducted in that state, wages earned while physically working in that state unless relevant for a retiree, capital gains from selling real estate located in that state. So again, Uncle Sam, whether it's on the federal or the state level, you're going to pay some taxes, but if you do smart with your real estate and the current real estate law, what we had paid off our primary residence, and so when we sold it, but we had lived in that property for more than 2 years, that the capital gains didn't apply to us because it was tax-free profit. So it's just kind of a little thing that we learned when we did our real estate investing. And so we'd buy an old home, we would fix it up, and then what we would end up doing is living in it for at least 2 years, 3 or 4 years or whatever. Then we'd sell it, and those profits would come in. It'd be like, hey, we made some money. Now, granted, there are some caps to how much profit is tax-free. So I think for individuals at the time, it was $250,000. For married joint, it was like $500,000. So again, tax laws change from, as quick as some people change their underwear. Other times it doesn't, but be sure to check with a qualified tax professional. But with all that tax-free money, that's a great way to help jumpstart your retirement in an overseas location or any location for that matter. So anyway, back to the little thing here, retirement income, a crucial point. There is a federal law, USC 114, the Pension Source Act, that specifically states from taxing most qualified retirement income, like pensions, 401k distributions, IRA distributions of individuals who are non-residents of that state. This is the most important point for you. Since you are no longer a resident of your former state, the state generally cannot tax your retirement distributions, even if the pension was earned while working there or the 401k or the IRA contributions were made while living there. This is something that apparently a lot of people don't know, and I'm glad I did the research on this. And I contacted a tax professional to verify that this was true for our situation. Again, look at the disclaimer, do your own due diligence, and contact your tax professionals about this. The year that you moved, for the specific tax year in which you moved from the U.S. to Korea or an overseas location, you were likely part of the year, a part-year resident of the state that you were in. Unless you moved right on the day, even just one day, you're going to be responsible for some amount of tax, whether it's a penny or two. Uncle Sam is going to get their tax. They're going to get their blood from you. So the year that you moved, from the specific tax year in which you moved from the U.S. to Korea or overseas, you're likely a part year of a resident of that state. During that transition year, you have owed state tax on all income received while you were still considered a resident of that state, and potentially on any state-sourced income received after you became a non-resident. You'll likely have to file a part-year tax return for the state for that specific year. So basically it's saying, let's say, for example, that 6 months you spent time of the tax year in your state, and then you decided to retire and move overseas. And then you spent the other 6 months in an overseas retirement location. So what's going to happen is that when tax time comes up for your state, you're still going to have to file taxes, and you will be responsible for the first 6 months of that year in the state that you lived. The last 6 months, you weren't in that state, so you won't be responsible for those taxes. So it'll be like an amended type of tax return. It's just going to be, hey, instead of being there for a full tax year, you're only there for 6 months, so you're only going to pay 6 months worth of taxes to that state. Kind of make sense? Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Here's some other information that we're going to go over here. As far as conclusions, assuming you are now a permanent resident of Korea, and this is also important because if your state says, hey, no, you got to pay taxes, having your approved visa showing that you're a resident of Korea and you have either through rental documents or you own property, your primary residence in an overseas location, that can be proof showing that, yes, I am now a permanent resident of another country, and the state tax, I don't get to pay it. But yeah, and your only income is typical retirement income, such as pensions, Social Security, 401k, and all that. You likely do not owe state taxes to your former U.S. state. Federal law protects your retirement income from state taxation by your former state once you are a non-resident. So like that individual that I talked to who was paying state taxes, and he had been doing it for years, found out that he didn't have to pay state taxes anymore. So I don't understand, because, if how much... it was just kind of a weird thing, but it is a very good question, and he was glad he found the information, was able to talk to me. He went to a tax professional, and he doesn't have to file taxes with the state that he used to live in because his primary residence is here in Korea. Exceptions. You will still owe taxes to your former state if you have ongoing income that is specifically sourced to that state. You still own a business, you rent a house, yada, yada, yada. Again, get with a tax professional. Final filing, you should ensure your property filed a final land part year resident return for the year that you left the state, and keep documents on hand, along with copies of your visa approval, with your passport. If your country that you moved to has an official document from a government office saying when you officially arrived into that country, date, month, year, and you can have a copy of that. That is proof for you that can help you in case the state says, no, you gotta pay taxes to us. And it's like, I don't live there anymore. Well, you see, the thing is that there's a lot of people that it's weird what we do. They're not used to people saying, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to retire to another country, and we're not going to live in the state anymore. So it really betwixt, it's so out of the norm that people are confused. It's like, no, you have to pay taxes. You have to pay state taxes. You got to pay. They don't understand the big picture, and they don't run into situations like this. But again, getting with a tax professional can help explain this to you and also help explain it to them at times. Some conclusions going forward. We talked about that. Recommendations: confirm that you have truly severed residency ties with your former state. No driver's license, voter registration, property ownership, unless it's purely investment rental, which you will still have to owe tax for that profit that you made on that property within that state. As far as saying no driver's license, I don't think that's the case. And when I asked about this, it doesn't really matter because you're issued the driver's license. And now that we're here in Korea, it ends up, it's like, well, we took our driver's license and we exchange it for a Korean driver's license, which is also acceptable in the United States if I ever need to go back. Because on the driver's license has Korean on one side and then English on the other, so I'm able to rent cars and drive in the United States or anywhere, basically. But yeah, it's other than that, yeah, you're pretty much set when it comes to not having to pay state tax. And again, the disclaimer down here, this is general information. Tax laws can be complex, state specific, significant assets, complex, whatever you got going on in your life. And that is why we end up saying that you need to look at the disclaimer here and check with a tax professional. So anyway, yeah, this is kind of a thing, people that end up talking about and saying, hey, well, I retired overseas. Do I have to pay taxes? Unfortunately, you still have to pay federal taxes, but in our instance, in the situation that we're in, we don't have to pay state tax because it's based off of your primary residence, and our primary residence is now here in Korea. And yeah, we don't have any real estate holdings or businesses in our old state, Colorado. So yeah. And again, what I ended up doing is contacting a tax professional. I also contacted the state department, revenue department for the state that we used to live in, asked that very specific question, and they're like, nope, if that is your primary residence, it's just like moving to another state. You're under the responsibility of that new place where your primary residence is, and you no longer have to pay state tax. So again, check with a tax professional. I can't stress that enough. Do your cross the T's, dot the I's, make sure that this is true for the situation that you're in. Because your situation might be different than my situation because of different situations. Imagine that. What are the odds? So anyway, yeah, never pay state taxes again. That is an added benefit. Granted that we didn't have to pay much state tax, but it depends on the state that you're in, and some states don't even have state tax. So some people that retire from those states into an overseas location, it's a non-issue. So anyway, with that, let's see, do we got any questions? We got Sloan Seaman says, how do you do banking in the U.S. with a foreign address? That's a good question. Banking in the United States, what we ended up doing is getting, there are some considerations. So when people retire overseas, some people will look in the country that they're going to retire to and find out what U.S. banks are there available in the location where they're going to retire. There's a lot of foreign banks in foreign countries, and so people are able to carry on their banking without any problems. Now, the question of how do you do that with a foreign address? Some banks don't have a problem with this, and with the advent of the internet and online banking, the two banks that we have, they don't care that I'm retired overseas. I get all my statements emailed to me. I have access through online banking apps. And yeah, it's even my contact phone number. I've been able to use my Korean phone number with the Korean country code and put that into the banking app and with the banks that we use. So yeah, that's not really a non-issue. Is that the same for every single bank? No, I'm not going to say that because there are some people that said they weren't able to put their foreign contact information because the address is different and there's no state and there's no city and there's no zip code. But again, it's something that you have to deal with. And if you're truly thinking about retiring overseas, it might require changing banks. It might require, if I'm going over to this country over here and they have a U.S. bank there that I can have access to, then I might have to change banks to get a bank account there. Now the question comes in, well, what about the Korean banking system? Do I have a Korean bank account? Yes, I do. My wife has a Korean bank account, and just so that you know, here in Korea, there are no joint bank accounts. So that's kind of an interesting little thing, little tidbit that comes up is that there are no joint bank accounts. Everybody has their own separate bank account. But how do I get money from the United States, say from like a pension or Social Security? How do I get that into my Korean bank account? There's a couple of ways that you can do this. One, you can wire money from your US bank to a Korean bank, to your Korean bank account or overseas bank account, but you're likely going to incur some fees. You know, there's going to be banking fees. They're going to make their money off of you either one way or another. But there are ways that you can get around that or pay minimal fees. And again, that might be a consideration when looking for a bank is how much do they charge for wiring funds from the US bank to a Korean bank, and what are those funds or fees? And you can make a determination if that's acceptable or not. For us, in our situation, as a military retiree, we live close to a United States military base, and the bank that we have has a branch on the military base. So this is beneficial for us because one, I have access to that military base, I have access to that bank. Now, will the bank, I don't have to pay any fees like somebody who would have to wire money from a US bank to a Korean bank. I don't have to pay those fees because what we end up doing is I go to the American bank that is on the military base, I withdraw the money, then I'll take that to a money exchange place, exchange it from US dollars to Korean won, and usually I will get a better exchange. Well, not usually, always. I have always gotten a better exchange rate than exchanging money at a US bank or even a Korean bank. So I'm able to save a little bit of money, actually make a little bit of money on the transaction, and then I can go deposit that money into my Korean bank. Let's see, another question from Sloan. Do you have a suggested app for moving money? Actually, no, I don't. Some people ended up talking about using Wise for transferring funds. There's people that I've talked to who are retirees in the Philippines, not so much here in Korea because people like us in similar situations, we all kind of do the same thing. We just withdraw from the bank on the military base, then we take it, exchange it, and then we deposit it into our Korean account. But with that being said, I do have some people that I know that are retired in the Philippines that use Wise as an app to transfer money. I'm not sure how that works, so I can't give a thought on that one way or another, other than that's what they said that they used. So that would be something to look into. But basically, yeah, what I ended up doing is having pension and other monies go straight to my Navy Federal Credit Union bank account, which is on the military base that I have access to, withdraw the funds, take it, exchange it, get a better exchange rate than the bank or, than the Korean or the U.S. bank would give me. Then I deposit those funds into our Korean bank account. And then the online banking, I have automatic bill pay for our cell phone service and a number of other things. So again, it's just kind of a once and done. You don't have to worry about it. Online banking, automatic payments, and everything is good to go. I think the only thing that I don't have on automatic is our property tax. And I think our property tax, we get that in the mail and then we have to go and pay that, which is next to nothing compared to what we paid in property tax in the United States. So anyway, yeah, that's the situation that we got going on here. A very good question of, property tax, or not property tax, but state tax. Do you have to pay it? Again, it's something that you should look into. And if you don't have to pay tax, then don't pay the tax. But again, do your due diligence. Another question that recently came up was mail system. This is a question I've gotten recently from a number of people asking about, well, what mail service do you use? And back in the day, before the advent of the internet and email, and you had to get bank statements and your tax tax forms and all of this stuff is all sent to a real physical mailing address. So if you move overseas and the IRS won't send those forms, or the bank won't send the forms and statements to an overseas address, what do you end up doing? Yeah, that's a very good thing. But really, since the advent of the internet and email and now banking, you can get paperless. Go for the paperless options, so you can log into your bank accounts. You can get all your transactions. You can get your statements, everything. Hell, you can even get your tax documents online. There's really no need for a physical address anymore. Even though, as a retiree, I do have a APOAP military address, a PO box on the military base at the post office there, but I'm limited to 16 ounces of mail, and I can't get Amazon packages. I can get medical packages from doctors and stuff like that, but really, it's just like there's a couple of financial institutions that I've said, hey, I want to do paperless, and yet a couple of times a year they'll still send me mail, to my actual address, but it's the exact same stuff that I get online anyway. Sloan talks about double taxation. Yes, nobody wants to get taxed once, let alone twice, and I totally agree with you. The interesting thing is, this is another question that I get about retiring overseas and retiring in Korea specifically, is that what do you do with the tax situation? They're worried about double taxation, and so was I. But it should be known that Korea and the United States and many other countries with the United States have entered into tax agreements. So that way there is no double taxation. So what I get taxed on my federal taxes, I do not get taxed again in the country that I'm living in, which is nice. So there's no double taxation. So does that mean that I will never have to pay taxes in Korea? Not necessarily. Again, the situation is going to dictate. But for general purposes, if your income, let's say you have a pension, let's say you have Social Security, yeah, you're not going to have to worry about double taxation of being taxed by the federal government or being taxed by Korea for those same things, those same retirement income sources. But again, check with a tax professional just to make sure, okay? The other cool thing is the current administration is talking about, and I'm an independent, so I'm not left or right. I like good ideas from both sides. But the current administration is trying to make it so that Social Security is not going to be taxed. People who receive tips are not going to be taxed, and he even wants to remove taxation for people that make $150,000 or below. So if that's the case, that'll be sitting pretty, because I don't make $150,000 in retirement. So regardless of how you feel about the current administration politically and their views and stance, if you're a retiree, I'm all for, let's not do the tax thing. There's other ways that we can fund our government and not through the hard work. And your retirement shouldn't be taxed, I think. You worked hard and you paid your taxes, and I'm all for not paying taxes, but it has to be legally. So anyway, the double taxation thing, again, check with a qualified professional. Depending on the country that you're retiring in, if that country has a no double taxation agreement with the United States, then you don't have to worry about that double taxation. So And Sloan ends up saying, thanks for answering. Well, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. All of these things come about. And when we retired overseas and came to Korea, what I ended up doing was going online to try to find somebody who had done what we were going to do. And strangely enough, I couldn't find anybody. I was like, wow, nobody has done this? We're like, I know other people have done it, but nobody had put it on social media or YouTube. And we were asking a bunch of questions and, can foreigners buy property in Korea? Can they get bank accounts? Can they get permanent cell phone service? What is this and that? All these questions that come in because details matter to me. And I wanted to have that warm fuzzy before we jumped in and retired overseas. So since there wasn't anybody to help us do that, that is another reason why I posted the videos on retiring overseas, sharing our experiences, and hopefully helping out other people. So with that being said, there are a number of people, husbands and wives, who have retired here in Korea that had seen my videos and thanked me immensely for sharing the information because they didn't know it was possible. And we were in the same boat. We didn't know that we could retire in Korea because when I checked, I did an online search. Does Korea have a retirement-friendly visa system like Thailand or Philippines? And the answer is no. And you got to have like millions and millions of dollars. And you can do an investment retiree type of thing. But we didn't have millions and millions of dollars because we were normal working people. So, yeah. But yeah, when we found out that we could come back and have a long-term visa in Korea because of my wife's Korean ancestry, then that allowed us to basically retire here in Korea. And after X number of years, eventually my wife is going to be able to get dual citizenship because she was Korean, she became a U.S. citizen, and then now I think when she hits 65, she'll be able to get dual citizenship, which yeah, she'll be here for good. And then there's also another visa, which is the, what is it? The F513, I think it is, that I think when you hit age 60-ish, but there are certain considerations, but it's like a 10-year visa if you apply for that, and the approval takes about 8 or 9 months. But that's a whole nother video. But yeah, let's see. We got a Freedom Baby. It says, I am a 100% disabled vet. Thank you for your service. With a wife and 2 kids, we wanted to move to Korea very badly, but they don't have a retirement visa. Yeah, unfortunately, Korea is with their aging population, and even though they have a lot of foreign workers and foreign students that come here, digital nomads, the work vacation visas that they have, they just don't have a retirement visa yet, and I don't understand why. Maybe it's because of there's such a, Korea's just kind of, they're Korean. It's kind of a thing there, kind of similar to Japan. So unless you have a family member that has some Korean ancestry, retiring in Korea is probably not going to be a thing. Maybe if you took get an educational visa, or maybe if you do a work visa of some type, then you'll be able to stay in Korea. But again, you'd have to check with an immigration lawyer on those situations. Let's see. Freedom Baby also says, we're possibly considering Spain. What is your opinion of raising kids overseas versus America? Being in the military and that the majority of our daughter's life, we have one kid, our daughter, raised primarily in Korea. Well, born in Korea, and then 4 weeks later we went to the United States. I was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I spent about 2 years, a year and 11 months. It was a year and 11 months, and I got orders to come back to Korea, which really pissed me off. I was supposed to be there for like 4 or 6 years, and then I could get deployed, but for some reason they were short of my MOS, and so I drew the short straw and had to go back to Korea. But with that, we ended up staying a number of years after that. I kept extending, and for the fact that the education that my daughter got in the military schools was a lot better than the public schools in the United States. That's just in our experience. Of course, that's dependent on the public school that you go to. If you go to a charter school in the United States, if you do homeschooling, that's an option. Again, for us, it seemed like she got a better education and was a more well-rounded person living overseas than just being stuck in the United States. I know it's kind of a broad stereotype to say, generalization to say, but it ends up, I think it did really well because it showed them that there's more of the world that is out there. They're able to be more, used to, I don't know, just grow up seeing more and experiencing more, and that resulted in higher maturity. Something else that comes into play if you have kids, I'm not sure the age of your children, but if they're going to go to a foreign English school, usually the education requirements for foreign schools overseas is a lot higher. They have higher standards. There's more homework than there is with public schools in the United States. So when we came from Korea after a number of years and came back to the United States, like when, because we came to Korea, we stayed a number of years, then we went back, and then to the United States for a while. Then it ended up, we went back and forth a lot. But when our daughter got to school after being overseas and under the military education system and went to public school in Colorado, she was bored because the grade level that she was at was like 2 years behind of what she was doing, about a year and a half behind of what she was doing and what she was used to in the school system that she was going to in Korea. So, and I've heard other stories and accounts of people who have had their children in English schools that lived overseas, that the standards are higher, and that when they did return to the United States, that their kids were so far above the public school system that, their kids were bored, and some of them actually ended up skipping a grade or two. So I've had people tell me that. So I think it's a good thing. I think it makes your kids more aware. They're able to mature. They see more, so they know more. They do more. They experience more, and it also helps with socialization, socializing with people other than just Americans. And they get a bigger worldview. And so depending on how you raise your children at home is also a big component of that. But I think overall it helps a lot more. So I'm a big component of that. And if you can't do that, then homeschooling. Homeschooling is really good if you can teach and be a good homeschool teacher and have some high standards. Again, it focuses around having high standards. And then doing activities. And if you live overseas, what's interesting is that there's a stark contrast between the people that I've seen live in the United States and they have kids and they don't really travel, they don't really go anywhere, versus families who move overseas and they're like, we're going on trips, when a weekend comes, we're going to this site, we're going here, we're going there. They end up being more well-traveled and they get more life experiences under their belt than the kids who just sit in the same hometown and piddle around and do nothing. So take that into consideration. So anyway, that's what we got going on. So unless anybody has any other questions, we're going to close out this video. But again, retire overseas and never pay state taxes again? It's possible, and it's possible. Again, the devil is in the details, and check with a qualified tax professional on that. But I can tell you, we're not paying state taxes because our primary residence is now here in Korea, and we don't have anything tying us to our old state in the United States. Still got to pay federal tax, unfortunately. So maybe the current administration will make the changes, and we won't have to do that. Anyway, Freedom Baby says, thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, you're welcome, and thank you for watching. And with that being said, I would appreciate if everybody would like and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching this on Facebook, then go to my YouTube page, The Varied Life, and that would help out with the algorithm. If you have any other questions, concerns, you can email me at this email address right there. I don't charge anybody anything. That's not what I do. I just share our experiences, and you take it for what it is and verify, do your own due diligence. But I will say that I've successfully answered every single email that people have sent me. And it's a lot of emails. And I even answered the crazy people. So there's some crazy people out there, and I've answered their emails. So if you got questions, there it is. Besides the like and subscribe, if you really want to do me a solid, you can also go down to the link in the description box. You can buy me a coffee, and that's where these people here, these are awesome people, they have bought me coffee as well. whether it's on the information of retiring overseas or 3D printing or resin printing, hobby, painting miniatures. It's a mishmash of stuff on my YouTube channel, but they bought me coffees for whatever reason, and I really appreciate that as well. Any funds that goes into that or comes from that goes back into the channel, and yeah, it's just kind of a fun thing. But then again, I also buy coffees for other people and creators and people on YouTube, so I don't know, it's almost like it's a wash sometimes. But it's good knowing that I can buy coffee for somebody. But again, ultimately, like and subscribe. I would appreciate that. And we'll see you on the next video. All right? Peace. Good stuff. No tech.